Hello. So welcome to Moment of Clarity. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for being here. Please hit subscribe, share it, all that good shit. Not a lot going on in the world recently, so I'm just gonna talk about, I guess, John Cena's switch to movies and television. You know how good of an actor he is, whether he should have stayed in the wrestling world or be a TV actor. No, actually, holy shit, a lot going on in the world. As you maybe heard, there's some big shit going down. There's so much to fucking say that it's tough for me to get it all straight and try and go through it and not just fucking blurt out 9 billion things at once. But let's try and go through this in some kind of catalog format. So to start off, yes, I'm opposed to fucking war, all war. I'm anti-Russian attack on Ukraine. I'm on Russians in Ukraine. I'm opposed to fucking war. How tough is this to understand? And here's the thing. I was anti-war when everyone was fucking cheering for bombing Iraq. I was anti-war when everyone was fucking cheering for bombing Libya. I was anti-war when everyone was cheering for bombing Gaza, which could have been yesterday. I was anti-war when people were cheering for bombing Syria, which Israel did yesterday. I was anti-war when the U.S. was bombing Somalia, I think also yesterday. I was anti-war when the U.S., when everybody was cheering for bombing Iran. I was anti-war, and Trump did fucking assassinate their top general in Iran. I was anti-war when everyone was cheering for bombing Afghanistan. And I'm anti-war now. It's really not that tough to understand. But basically what people, I guess, criticize me for, and criticize a lot of people, I'm not going to act like it's all about me, is you're supposed to have no context whatsoever. You're supposed to, if you tweet or say anything that has any kind of context or understanding or larger historical understanding or any sort of understanding of what the fuck is going on in the world, then you're a shill, you're a traitor, you are a war supporter, whatever the fuck it is. Basically, you have to be ignorant to get the true virtue signaling stamp of approval. You just have to act like that Russia invaded Ukraine in a void, that there's no other world around it. And end of story. So you have to get the virtue team on your side, you have to be ignorant of reality. And unfortunately, I've failed at that front, despite my efforts to be as ignorant as possible. So yes, I'm opposed to all things war. It's fucking catastrophic. It's awful. How many innocent people die? How many innocent people die right now in Russia's attack on, invasion of the Ukraine? How many innocent people die by the neo-Nazi Ukrainians that have killed Russians in Ukraine? Like, I'm opposed to that too. See, because all the people who want to be like, fucking, Russia, right now, for some reason they were fine when neo-Nazis were killing people in Ukraine. Not a problem for them. I never heard a word from them. Not a peep. They also, most of them were completely silent as the U.S. bombs people in all those places I just listed: Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Syria, Libya, all that bombing, Yemen, the war we're supporting in Yemen, one of the most horrific wars in the world right now. You don't hear from these people, do you? They're not on the streets furious for any of that. All that's fine. All that death and destruction. The estimates now, and I'll get more into this in a bit, but the estimates now is 6 million people killed by the U.S. war on terror. So I am fine with you being anti-war right now, as long as you fucking are anti-war all the time. As long as you're equally angry and furious for the 6 million that have died from our wars over the past 20 years. I want to see that from you, okay? Please. But anyway, so let's get a little deeper into some of this. Now, I'm gonna try not to just endlessly repeat everything I already said or Ben Norton already said in the interview I did on Redacted VIP. If you didn't catch that, 20-minute interview with journalist Ben Norton on everything that's going on in Ukraine. Of course, it was filmed Wednesday evening, so there's not, there's about 1 day of updates that aren't going to be in that, but That's at, you can get that at elitecamp.com. I'm going to try not to repeat myself too much, but it's inevitable that there's going to be some repeating. So I'm not willing to do the no context thing. I'm not willing to just say, hey, I'm really dumb and ignorant and just Russia sucks. End of story. Oh, and by the way, if you needed to hear this, if this is really important to you to hear, no one tells me what to say. I've never been told what to say. I fucking never have censored myself. I've never been censored. And people I know have a hard time believing that because Redacted Tonight is at RT, but it's the simple truth. It's the only network where I'm allowed to completely be free and not censored. That's why I'm there. That's why I do the show. Furthermore, this isn't even Redacted Tonight. This is Moment of Clarity, as you're seeing right now. RT, fucking no one at RT even sees Moment of Clarity. So anyway, if you needed to know all that, there you go. That you can't say that, by the way, for anybody on your mainstream media networks. They are censored all the time. We've had people get fired or leave those networks and come forward and do interviews on just how thoroughly they are censored on all your mainstream networks. Melissa Harris Perry, incredibly successful anchor on MSNBC. When she was forced out, she did an interview on Democracy Now! Saying she was regularly censored. But one of the ones that always stuck in my mind is she was censored for trying to cover the Beyonce Super Bowl halftime show. Because Beyonce had on a Black Panther-inspired outfit, and Melissa Harris Perry wanted to talk about that, and MSNBC said absolutely not. So that's the level of censorship. You can't talk about Beyonce's outfit at MSNBC. Whereas I have never been told not to say something. Okay, moving past that. You can say you disagree or it is wrong to bomb a country, to attack a country in all ways. You can say that and also talk about the context. Also talk about why it's happening. Without that meaning that you think it's fine or that you think it's warranted. For example, real quick, in case you say, oh, no, that's not true. If you talk about why someone's doing something, that means you're supporting it. Well, I could talk about why the FBI had Martin Luther King killed. They had him killed because he was becoming too powerful, because he was linking together class, the lower class, into a very strong group of people that could fight together, Black people and white people working together as poor people's campaign, workers' campaigns, fighting for strikes, for the what was it, the trash workers, I think, in Memphis, fighting for all those things. He was uniting peoples in a way that the American government, the white supremacist American government, I would say at the time, but it's pretty white supremacist now, was not okay with. Okay, he in his final year of his life, he came out against the Vietnam War, so he was troublesome to them on that front, turning the entire country, or at least the people that followed him, against the Vietnam War. He came out against capitalism, which is very troublesome to them as well. So that's why they had him killed. Does that mean I think awesome that they killed MLK? No, not at all. You can talk about the context without fucking meaning you're endorsing it. Another example, JFK. Why not get into JFK for a minute? Why did the CIA have him killed? Pretty obvious, isn't it? He was creating peace with Russia behind closed doors, although he did give a very public speech where at American University, where he talked about how important the Soviet Union was to the world and how much good they had done. Just a few months before he was killed, he refused to invade Cuba. He wanted to crush the CIA. He said he wanted to break it up and sprinkle it into the wind. He fired the head of the CIA. He had plans to decrease the CIA funding by 20% over the coming years. So the CIA had a lot of reasons that they wanted to take out JFK. So there you go. I give you the context for why they took out JFK. That doesn't mean I endorse it. Doesn't mean I support it. I think the fucking CIA is sociopaths. Well, psychopaths, maybe. And thought that they had a right to kill anyone they wanted to. Why did they kill Mary Meyer? Well, because she knew too much about what JFK was doing, why the CIA turned against him, why they wanted him out. And she was speaking up about it. So they had her killed, etc. Anyway, I'll stop going down that path. You get the idea. Oh, actually, I won't stop going down that path. One more example. The Unabomber. I don't endorse the Unabomber's methods or killing or bombing or any of that. However, I might mention he was a victim of the MK Ultra program. You can look that up on Wikipedia. He rather public now. The Unabomber when he was like 17, 18 years old, I believe at Harvard. So he was like a prodigy, a genius, but he was very young, 17, I think. And they severely fucked with his mind in a pretty horrific way with the MK Ultra program. And he ended up fucked up. Now, was he fucked up before that? I don't know. But I'm just saying, you can talk about that. Hey, Unabomber was pretty fucked up by the MK Ultra program without saying, yeah, so it's fine to bomb people. Okay, you get it now? So now that we've discussed that, now that you understand that, now that you're not behaving like a child who thinks that you cannot discuss the reality of the world or therefore you're endorsing war, let's now discuss the context of Russia's moves or, you know, more specifically, the government's moves, because I get into this a lot. You are not your nation, all right? Let's stop acting like all Americans agree and we're all in one united front and America is this thing and Russia is this thing. Guess what? There are anti-war protesters in Russia right now. There are anti-war protesters in America right now against the wars, all the wars America's involved in. There are anti-war protesters in Britain right now. There are anti-war protesters in fucking most every country that's involved in some kind of skirmish or conflict. Or even the ones that aren't. There's anti-war protesters telling those countries to stop befriending other countries that are involved in war. So let's stop acting like we are our nation, like a nation is one block of human beings. Russia did this thing. Ukraine did this thing. There are Ukrainians killing fellow Ukrainians right now. There are refugees fleeing the Donbass region to Russia who have Russian passports, consider themselves Russian, speak Russian, and where do they live normally? In Ukraine. So saying Ukraine is this thing really is a form of propaganda. It forces you to think a certain way. And that's their goal. They want you to think in these forms because it gets everybody in line. It gets you in line behind your government if you think in terms of just nation states instead of thinking, hey, I probably have a lot more in common with your average worker in Ukraine or your average worker in Russia or your average worker across the United States than I do with the ruling elite of any of these countries. The ruling elite in most countries are fucking assholes of the grandest kind. That's how they got to that position. So if we stopped talking about it like nations states and started talking about it like, hey, I'm for the people of these countries, I'm opposed to their ruling elite, it would really, the way you talk changes the way you think. So if we started talking about it more like that, I think it'd have a big difference. This doesn't mean I always succeed. Through the rest of this video, I may say Russia did this several times, but, you know, it's tough to live within a paradigm and not always abide by the structure of the rules, of the linguistic rules, of the other rules in society. You know, I may know consumerism is completely fucked and that we're destroying the world. That doesn't mean I never am taken by a consumerist impulse. You've been propagandized to your entire life and you fall for the garbage a fair amount of the time. I just try and maybe decrease the amount I fall for it, you know, like a little percentage. But anyway. Okay, so now that we agree, and if you don't agree that you can talk about context and you still want to be a child, then you should probably just hang up right now. You should probably, if this involved hanging up, you should probably just turn this video off. Because if you're incapable of thinking about the context of things, if you're worried it might corrupt your brain to know the reality in the world, then that's your thing. That's your decision. And yeah, more power to you. Turn this video off right now. All right, so... Oh, by the way, quick note, if anyone donates on the super chat or anything, that all goes to people who are struggling. I've gone into the details of that many times before, so I won't waste time on it now. But also, if you're not watching this live, you can donate on Venmo at Lee Camp, and it all goes to people who are struggling in these tough times. But so let's discuss. And by the way, most of what I'm about to say is not coming from me. So if you think, oh, well, Lee is a propagandist or whatever, I'm going to show you who it's coming from. It's actually most of the document I'm about to go through with you is coming from a pro-U.S. Foreign policy analysis of what's going on right now. However, despite being pro-U.S., they still give a lot of details that you're not going to hear on your mainstream media, that are going to be covered by your mainstream media, because they don't want you to know the context. They don't want you to know the reality. But for one thing, let's talk about the fact that Russia has been, and now I am talking about the country as in the borders, Russia has been slowly surrounded and suffocated by NATO, which is a military alliance. In the U.S., at least before I started studying this stuff, and I really was thinking about it, and I used to just flip on MSNBC or whatever when I was a younger man, but mentally a child. I thought I'd hear the word NATO and I just think positive thoughts. NATO, oh, that's a bunch of countries cooperating. But it's a military alliance. It is saying that this group of countries will go to war with any country that comes after one of them. So it is a very threatening thing to those not in NATO, meaning if you are surrounded by NATO countries, it's essentially equivalent to being surrounded by all the militaries of those countries as a one. And so after World War II, when NATO first began, there was an agreement with Russia, the Soviet Union at the time, that NATO would not go past a certain point, would not go past Germany. And I'm going to show you now how NATO has progressed over the years. This is a pretty good map of NATO enlargement. And if you look here, so 1949, it begins. You can see the dark blue, not all the blue, but the very dark blue, or maybe can't tell if it's black from this angle. I think it's blue. But it includes, France, United Kingdom, Norway, Iceland, Denmark, Italy. But that's about it. This little bit on the side of Europe, really, is NATO. Then in 52, a few countries get added. Then 55 to 1990, you add the brighter blue. In 52, Turkey gets added. Okay, so you're getting closer to Russia. Closer to the Soviet Union at the time. Then that takes you up to 1990. Now, still at that point, there's a huge buffer zone between, except for maybe Turkey, but basically a huge buffer zone between Russia and NATO, the military alliance of NATO. There's Poland, there's Romania, there's Ukraine, all these smaller countries. They're all in between. And it gives Russia some comfort, right? That they're not, that they don't have a fucking foreign military and in a way, an enemy military, although there's been some times of cooperation on their borders. But then after 90, and actually the next one is 99, when you see more countries join, which is Poland, Hungary, Slovenia, Czech Republic, and 2004, more of them join. Slovakia, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. So many of these are former Soviet bloc countries. So now countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union, the breakup in 1991, they are now joining NATO. So they are now part of a military alliance that is basically opposed to Russia. So Russia is now getting more and more of these NATO countries on their border, meaning there's more military weaponry pointed at them. And now, if you see what it says here, so let's see, 2017, there's a couple more. And then the dark red is a membership action plan to add those countries. And then, meaning there is an actual schedule for when they'll be added. And then intensified dialogue is what Ukraine is listed as, and Georgia, this pink color. Now, there has been discussion of Ukraine joining NATO, and it is an absolute no-go for Russia. Russia has said absolutely it is completely unacceptable for Ukraine to join Russia. There's many reasons for this. One of them I just gave you. Another is that, in 2014, the U.S. created a coup. It was a U.S.-backed coup. It doesn't mean that it was all U.S. done, but a U.S.-backed coup in Ukraine that took out the Russia favorable government and put in a U.S. and Western favorable government. There's a lot more details to this, but that coup is heavily involved with Nazis, straight up Nazis. I've shown images on Redacted tonight of swastikas on their helmets, SS on their helmets, and one of the biggest groups of Nazis in that is the Azov Battalion, which is linked to the Ukrainian National Guard. So there, since 2014, there has been fighting in the Donbass region of Ukraine. We got into a lot of that in the interview with Ben Norton, so you can go watch that if you'd like. So Russia is like, they've got Nazis on their border, straight up Nazis, U.S. backed, U.S. funded to some degree. I'm not saying full funding, but U.S. somewhat armed. And these are, you can go read this news at Yahoo News. There was a Yahoo, like that's how public this is. This is not, I'm not coming up with something. I had a guy call me and tell me there's Nazis in the Ukraine. No, you can go read some of these articles at mainstream outlets. Yahoo News ran a report on the CIA helping to fund and arm Nazi battalions or Nazi-linked battalions in Ukraine. I showed an image on Redacted tonight of UK British military meeting with these battalions in Ukraine just a few. I showed it on the show just a week or two ago. So I'm going to get into more of the detail in a second, more of the details, nitty gritty of why Russia thought it made sense, or again, Russian government thought it made sense right now to do what they just did. Again, I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying it's fine. I'm giving you context. Just like I gave you context before that of why they killed JFK. I'm giving you context. If you can't understand that, then fucking turn this off because you're a child and you should go watch Sesame Street or something. Or whatever the modern equivalent of that reference would be. Go watch Blues Club. Nope. Still not modern. Dora the Explorer. Nope. Wiggles? I don't fucking know, okay? My most modern child reference is fucking 15 years ago. Anyway. So leading up to this week, I will say this, that the U.S. clearly, the U.S. government and the U.S. intelligence knew that this was about to happen. China knew this was about to happen. And I don't know that I said it publicly. I did talk about how Biden has manufactured for wars throughout his consent for war throughout his entire career. He fucking loves war, all right? He's Joe Biden's almost like John McCain. He's never met a war he didn't like. So the U.S. was saying this was going to happen. And I, along with just about everybody on the left, I'd say, got the analysis wrong. Again, I don't know if I said it publicly. Maybe I did in a video. I don't know. Saying that Russia would not invade Ukraine. But the reason is that so many got it wrong is because, like, literally the U.S. has lied us into every fucking war since World War II. And even that one's arguable. I don't mean arguable that it should have been fought. I mean, arguable as to what they were telling us was the truth. But clearly not arguable that it should have been fought. When the 6 million Jews were killed, I feel like that was a good time to be like, maybe we should get involved. Maybe we should do something. But you notice they didn't bomb the train lines in Germany. They didn't bomb the train tracks because they weren't so concerned about the Jews getting killed. Anyway, why so many people got it wrong is because the U.S. government has proven again and again and again. In Vietnam, Gulf of Tonkin was a lie. Fucking Korea, we were lied to. Iraq, no weapons of mass destruction, yellow cake uranium, all that bullshit, anthrax, bullshit. Afghanistan, we're not told the full context of where Al-Qaeda came from. Oh, funded by the CIA. Oh, Osama bin Laden was on the cover of the New York Times as a freedom fighter. You can go look at the picture. Yeah, not told any of that shit, just told Afghanistan bad. Let's keep going. Libya, fucking lied to immensely about what was going on in Libya. But fucking Syria, the chemical weapons attack that the whistleblowers at the OPCW have come forward and said was bullshit, as we kind of assumed and knew, and I and many others said was bullshit at the time, even before the whistleblowers came forward. Anyway, we're lied to again and again and again and again after every fucking conflict the U.S. has ever been involved in. Even the economic wars we're lied to. We're lied to about what's going on in Venezuela. We're lied to about what's going on in Cuba. Lied to about what's going on in Iran, Palestine. We're lied to fucking endlessly. So when Biden trotted out there and said, Russia's going to invade Ukraine. It's what's going to happen. We were all like, all right, Grandpa's off his rocker again. Because they do this shit again and again and again. But it turns out the reality of it was that the U.S. did know Russia was going to do this, and they thought they could get ahead of it by announcing that it was going to happen. Now, there are ways. Here's the thing. They actually could have gotten ahead of it and stopped it with diplomacy. However, the U.S. has gone back on every agreement, the promise they made to Russia not to expand NATO, the promise they made in the Minsk agreements. Again and again, they go back on their promises, and everything Russia says they need for their security, the Russian government, again, says they need for their security, the U.S. says no. Even when these requests shouldn't be that controversial. Such as, hey, U.S., don't put long-range missiles on our fucking border that could bomb Moscow. I wonder why they don't want that. So what went down in 2014? So anyway, that's why so many people got it wrong. But I will tell you that except for that, which again, I'm not even sure I said anything publicly about Russia won't invade, but except for that, I've gotten everything else ever right. So consider that. I could go through the list for you sometime, but yeah. Anyway. So here is some of the details of, so this is a pretty great analysis from Foreign Policy Research Institute. Again, this is a pro-US think tank. I don't endorse probably 99% of the reports that come out of this place. I'm not even really endorsing this report because it leaves out the entire American side of things, meaning what America's responsible for, such as the 2014 U.S.-backed coup involving Nazis. Keep in mind, if you want to know how that feels for Russians, Russia lost 27 million people in World War II. The U.S. lost 500,000. So do you think they have a bit of a sore spot when it comes to dudes with swastikas on their helmets? Do you think they're not real big fans of that? Over 20 million people killed to the Nazis in World War II. And now they have Nazis on their border killing people who identify as Russian in the Donbass region. So Putin has started to use the word genocide, which I don't know that it's a genocide. I'd say that word has been heavily diluted. However, I will say this. It's closer to being a genocide when you have Nazis at the helm of these fucking battalions than the Uyghurs in China, which is hilarious propaganda. The Uyghur genocide, which they're calling a cultural genocide because they can't actually put forward any proof of Uyghurs being killed. So now they've decided to change the terminology, and they claim they were all enslaved, but only during the part of the pandemic when no one could travel to China, because that was the time when they could say that propaganda without anyone finding out it wasn't true. So now that some people can travel to China and see fucking Uyghurs walking around everywhere, they go, "Oh yeah, they've all been let out. They're not enslaved. They found a tunnel out of the jail. So they're not all, so they're walking around now, a lot of them, just kind of walking. Anyway. All right, so I'm going to read some of this Foreign Policy Research Institute's document. Let's see here. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but I'll give it a try anyway. So these are just the parts that I just put parts of it in this document because it was way too long to go through the whole thing. But so they're talking about why diplomacy is broken down. And by the way, this is written 2 weeks before, I think 2 weeks before the Olympics. So this is several weeks ago, but they clearly knew what was happening. Moscow has submitted various ultimatums to the West and to Ukraine. But the most critical and pressing issue is that the Kremlin now regards Ukraine as a permanently hostile country, continuing to increase its defense capabilities. Keep in mind, that's all true. We are sending missiles to Ukraine to point at Russia. Russian hopes for improved relations with President Zelensky were dashed in 2021, and Moscow is now focused on reducing the long-term security risk posed by Ukraine, including halting its expanding defense cooperation with NATO. However, this is one of the most unrealistic and difficult demands for NATO to satisfy, particularly because Ukraine is developing long-range missiles domestically. Now, keep in mind that what I just read you doesn't even gel with what you're seeing on CNN, right? If you turn on CNN, they say, oh, Putin's Hitler and he just wants to take over Ukraine. Well, that's not what this pro-U.S. Foreign Policy Research Institute document is saying. And they got all of this right weeks ago. So I think they seem to know what they're talking about to some degree. A better explanation of Moscow's current actions is that they are a part of a compellence campaign. If Moscow can't convince the United States to agree to some of its demands, which are about not expanding NATO, etc., and force Ukraine to make concessions, it may view military force as a last resort to change what it considers an unacceptable status quo. Russian behavior suggests that it believes the cost of inaction would be greater than the cost of significant military escalation in Ukraine, particularly after reviewing the events in Ukraine over the summer and fall. Now, they're about to talk about Zelensky, and keep in mind, Zelensky came to power in 2019, former comedian. He basically got elected because he starred in a show that had him playing the president of Ukraine. And people were like, that guy's funny. And he has on the president's jacket. He has on the president hat. I don't know why I gave them like thick Southern accents, but because it seemed far more funnier to me than if they were just like, well, that man is funny and he has on the president hat. So he's funny. He have on the president hat. So he got elected in 2019. He on a platform of peace and easing the conflict in the Donbass region, where I already mentioned many of the people consider themselves Russian, not Ukrainian, but these stupid borders and our stupid nation states are fucking crazy. So, yeah, he came in on a platform of peace. That didn't work. And even though his government, not the highest level of the government, but lower down, and the Azov battalion and stuff, even though some of them are Nazi linked, Zelensky himself is Jewish. So let's just say awkward Thanksgiving dinner for that group. Don't think they have Thanksgiving in Ukraine. We want to celebrate when pilgrims came to the United States. What is wrong with that? We like how they massacred the Native Americans. Russia offered a more conciliatory approach after Zelensky's inauguration with the hopes of reaching a deal over Donbass, which included replacing the more hawkish Zhukov with Kazak as the Kremlin's point person for negotiations with Ukraine. However, Russian officials felt Kiev did not live up to its commitments from the 2019 Normandy summit. So again, Russia is saying, look, we made these commitments and you're not actually living up to them. Same with the U.S. Did not live up to the commitments, which included granting the Donbass a special status. In 2020, after reaching a tentative agreement on establishing an advisory council with Russia, Kiev walked back from the deal after domestic criticism. Moscow concluded that Ukrainian domestic politics would prevent any progress in implementing the Minsk agreements without external pressure. So basically, they keep getting these agreements, and Ukraine, under U.S. pressure, keeps going back on the agreements. I don't know all the details of the agreements, but the breaking of these agreements is slowly showing Russia that it doesn't matter what they agree to. It's not going to be done anyway, at least according to the Russian government's view of things. Again, we aren't our nations, okay? A lot of Russian people out there that are protesting against war right now. A lot of Russian people that support getting rid of missiles and Nazis on their border. You are not your country. Fucking be a dude or a lady. Be yourselves. Live for you. I don't mean live for yourself in a selfish way, but live as yourself. Don't just say, I am a block of 100 million people, even though if you put me in a room with 80% of them, I might have a lot of disagreements with everything they believe. But for right now, just so we can ramp up to world war, let's pretend we're a block of 100 million people. Kiev continued to pursue policies that angered Russian officials. Putin reacted angrily after the Ukrainian parliament adopted a law on indigenous peoples, which did not include Russians. It also didn't include Ukrainians. He compared the law's consequences to those of some kind of weapon of mass destruction. In August, Zelensky sanctioned several Russian entities and blocked several Russian websites, including the digital service provider, blah, blah, blah. And again, as I'm reading this document was not put together by the Russian government or RT or anything. This is the Foreign Policy Research Institute, a pro-U.S., probably kind of hawkish, largely hawkish think tank. I don't know about everything they put out. Maybe they're just straight up hawkish. But in this document, they happen to be putting forward the reality, because guess what? Here's the thing is, our media and our government want you to believe a simplified propaganda version of what's happening. Russia bad, they go into Ukraine. That's all they want you to know. Whereas they have a far more complex analysis of what's going on there, even if they agree with you and with with CNN, even if they agree with the CNN viewpoint that Russia bad going to Ukraine, they have this nuanced view that they discuss in board meetings, but they don't tell you about because they think you're too dumb to make good decisions if you have reality in your brain. And so they give you a just fucking very simplified, empty version. The third factor explaining... Oh, hold on. Put it back on the screen. The third factor explaining the timing of the spring buildup, they're talking about buildup of Russian forces, was Azerbaijan's victory in the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War. Shows how much I know about this. Can't pronounce that at all. Azerbaijan won with critical support from Turkey, which included Turkish officials operating the TB2. I don't think that stands for tuberculosis. Unmanned combat aerial vehicles. Oh man, the aerial vehicles are dropping tuberculosis now. Aerial vehicles that played such a crucial role. The war was the first time an outside power had used military force in the former Soviet Union and was only the latest in a series of confrontations between Russia and Turkey. The two countries had recently fought over Syria's Idlib and Aleppo provinces and Libya in the spring of 2020. In addition, Ankara had sold TB2 combat drones to former Soviet states. So Russia is seeing an increase of conflict with states onto former Soviet bloc countries. 1 week after the June 2021 summit between Biden and Putin, the United Kingdom sent the HMS Defense frigate through Crimean territorial waters, infuriating Russian officials. A Russian Coast Guard ship fired warning shots, and then they claim they dropped a bomb in its path, but no one's has any evidence of that, so it's probably a lie to make them sound strong. But anyway, this goes to show that the British, along with the U.S., I mean, really, they can be considered one force in this situation, are doing what they can to piss off and show superiority and strength against Russia in Russian territorial waters. So that's pissing them off. And again, that's not coming from me. This is Foreign Policy Research Institute. Now, here is perhaps one of the most critical parts of this document. Russia doesn't use force for the sake of waging war, but instead, whereas quick side note that I don't think Russian Policy Research Institute would like for you to talk about, the U.S. in some ways does, because there's just a lot of good money in war for the U.S. The weapons contractors, their stocks go through the roof every time we have a war. Every time there's even war threatened, like with Iran, weapons contractors' stocks go through the roof. Weapons contractors in the military-industrial complex are a major part of the U.S. economy. So, yes, our choices of where to wage war may have to do with far more than just making a dollar on the stock market. But our economy is so wrapped up in endless war that you are never going to see the U.S. stop the endless war games, not willingly. That has to keep running because it is just such a large part of our economy that our ruling elite view war as a very important part of our wealth, our global, the wealth that gives us the power over the globe. So we do kind of wage war to wage war. Again, there's many other reasons. I've gone into many of the reasons we say went into Syria or Iraq in the past. So I won't dig into those right now. But Russia doesn't use force for the sake of waging war, but instead to achieve specific political goals. Their list of demands includes a complete halt of NATO expansion, because I showed you the map earlier. NATO is basically surrounding Russia. Limits on the deployment of intermediate and short-range missiles, and an end to U.S. and NATO countries' defense cooperation with Ukraine. Although Russia is interested in a broader dialogue regarding Europe's security architecture, Ukraine is Moscow's most pressing and important issue, explaining Russia's demands to resolve the issue quickly. None of Russia's other demands, such as the end to further NATO expansion, explain why Moscow is so determined to force the issue right now, since there's no indication other countries, including Ukraine, could join NATO in the near future. And here's the last paragraph I read, and one of the most important ones. One of the most specific concerns raised by President Putin and other Russian officials is the potential threat posed by long-range missiles based in Ukraine, which could reach Moscow in a matter of minutes. Given the deadlock on negotiations over the Minsk agreement implementation, Russia has concluded that Ukraine will remain a hostile neighbor for the foreseeable future, and Kiev continues to strengthen its defensive capabilities. If Russia can't force neutrality on Ukraine, Moscow will try to prevent Ukraine from improving its conventional deterrence. So there you go. And again, not coming from me, okay? Those of you who want to say I'm, making shit up. This is a pro-U.S., perhaps even pro-war think tank analyzing the situation with Russia and what it is Russia wants. Now, for the people without any context who watch CNN and just go, oh, Putin wants to take over the world, and so he's invading Ukraine. End of story. No further discussion. And then someone tries to give them any kind of context, not saying it's justified, not saying it's right. Just try and give them any kind of context, and they all go, you're a traitor. So I think in order to understand the world in which we live, you should have this context. You should know what's going on. But a lot of people want to remain just aggressively ignorant, and they get upset if you try and take them out of that ignorance. And just one more thing I want to go through here. By the way, several people have tweeted, independent journalists have posted or tweeted things like, yes, Russia's actions are wrong, or the Russian government's actions are wrong. Also, if you live in a NATO state right now, your job, your goal should be to stop NATO countries, your country, from ramping up this violence. Because if we see a tit for tat, then that ends with a lot more people being killed. So all the people right now upset that there are probably people being killed in Ukraine, I mean, there are people being killed in Ukraine, All of you upset about that should want as few people as possible to be killed right now or going forward. Like, that should be your aim. Ending war, stopping the ramp up to a larger war. That should be your goal. And instead, what you see in the mainstream media, like the questions they ask of Biden, all try and point him to more war, to more killing. But Biden, are you going to fire nuclear weapons? And I didn't actually see the clip, but one of the media outlets was talking about how his response was, I don't know. And you're like, you don't know whether this could be a nuclear apocalypse? Perhaps your answer should be no. We're not going to kill the planet at this juncture. We're going to do it later with climate change in a couple of years. But for now, your answer should be no. This is not going to be a nuclear conflict. But it amazes me how much people who claim to be upset about what's going on and be anti-war are like, so the solution to being anti-war is ramp up the war. Well, how do you figure? How do you figure that's the answer? Also, just a couple of more points. I mean, most of that was giving you context for what's going on. And there's plenty of context I didn't get into, but, can't get into because of I'm not going to sit here for 4 hours. I'm not doing a Twitch stream, all right? I'm not going to leave this running while I wash my dishes or whatever. But the breathtaking hypocrisy of watching your mainstream media right now is just hilarious. It's amazing. There was a report on CNN about how handicapped people or differently abled or whatever the best term is now are people, handicapped people are worried. People with disabilities. That's what I should say. People with disabilities are worried about what's going on in Ukraine because it's tougher for them to flee or to get out of the way or to change locations. And it's like, absolutely, that's a good thing to worry about. How about you also worry about it for every fucking other bomb the U.S. drops? How about that? Your government. Where was CNN talking about people with disabilities during our Syria strikes? Where was CNN talking about people with disabilities as Israel bombs Palestine? Where was CNN talking about people with disabilities as the U.S. government literally crushes Venezuela, 100,000 people dead from our economic sanctions? Who do you think that kills? It kills people with disabilities. It kills people who are ill. It kills people who are old. It kills babies. That's what our economic war on places like Venezuela or Syria or Iran or Afghanistan right now is doing. So the hypocrisy is just unfucking believable. It's like, I'm all for you being against war, against bombing, against troop buildups, against killing, against innocents dying. Absolutely. Could you also do it for all of the U.S. fucking war that's been perpetrated over the past 20 years? 6 million people are dead from our wars on terror over the past 20 years. And CNN has rallied consent, rallied support, rallied downright cheering for all of those wars. 6 million dead. That is the latest estimate. That includes both 1 million killed directly, meaning killed by bombs, bullets, etc., and then 5 million who've died from hunger, died from not being able to get their medications, died from not being able to get water, died from all of the reasons that come with war. So we kill 6 million people. CNN didn't have a problem with people with disabilities. We're really concerned about it. It's so disgusting. It drives you fucking nuts. Anyway, it's just amazing to see the level of hypocrisy and how they're playing everybody. I mean, it's funny because they're using the idea of anti-war. Please hold. They're using the idea of anti-war to push for war. They're using the idea of anti-war to allow all of the other U.S. fucking wars, all the other NATO wars, like Libya that NATO endorsed. It's just amazing. It's fucking repulsive. Anyway, there's some context. If that upset you to learn context, then you have a child's brain. And again, you should go watch insert modern children's show here. I know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's a modern children's show, right? If you really can't handle learning context for what's going on in the world, then fucking talk to yourself about that. Ask yourself why it's so upsetting to learn the context of what's going on. I mean, not upsetting as in you feel bad for people. Upsetting as in you don't want to learn it. Upsetting as in you have to turn things off that start to give you an understanding of why the world is the way it is. Again, this doesn't endorse any of it. I explained to you some context as to why JFK and MLK were assassinated earlier on this video. That's how I started the video. That does not mean I endorsed the assassinations of MLK and JFK. Okay, guys. If you want independent media that is not your garbage mainstream media, is not some other propaganda source, go to radindiemedia.com, RADINDIE media.com, because, and you can look there, like fucking go and decide if you like the media or not. You can click at the top. So it's a site that I created, but there's no money making in it. I created it with Eleanor Goldfield. There's no ads. There's no corporate sponsorship. It's not run by any larger umbrella organization. And you can see there's a at the top, there's a watch button if you're looking for videos about this stuff. There's a listen button if you're looking for podcasts. And there's a read button if you like to read things. And it's all up there. And you can get updates every day on what the fuck's going on around the world, what the fuck's going on in Ukraine. And it's all from awesome independent media. All right, guys. Please share this. Please become a member at rockfin.com/LeeCamp. If you want to help continue the things I do, Common Censored Podcast, Government Secrets Podcast, go to liberapay.com/LeeCamp, LIBERAPAY.com/LeeCamp, and keep fighting.